motivation for establishing the Community Fellows Program?
Well, Topper, as you know, Mel came over several years ago and talked to Jerry Wiesner about a variety of things and said to him, among other things, that you fellows ought to be helping us in terms of community development and in terms of leadership development. And this seemed like a very good idea. And subsequently, Mel and Lloyd Rodwin, who was then and still is the chairman of the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, got together and came up with a document which has become the charter for the program. And I always take some pride in this, because it seems to me here's a case where a need of the minority community is being met in conjunction with the academic community, and I would say that Mel had substantial input into the concept of the program, as well, of course, in terms of the implementation, since he is a director.
How did the program end up at MIT?
Simply because Mel came to MIT.
Okay.
And one of the more interesting issues early on was the question of how this should be handled. And I think everybody concluded that it ought to be at MIT, but that there would be opportunity, because in the minority community of those days, one of the key issues was whether you'll get co-opted if it happens at MIT. And so, but that's been one of the things that we've been very concerned, that the needs of the minority community could get met at a place like MIT, and there could be a mutually reinforcing side to it, but neither side, in effect, would get co-opted. But Mel came here. I don't know whether he went elsewhere or not, but we decided that this was something that we wanted to do.
How long has it been operating?
We're in the third year now, and it's an experimental effort, and it will go on for 4 years. And we're currently considering the question of whether and how it ought to go on beyond this experimental effort.
How are the fellows selected?
Well, by mandate, Topper, we're required to take 1/3 to 1/2 of the fellows from the greater Boston area. And we have recruited primarily by direct mail. We've sent out some 3,000 to 4,000 letters to elected officials, urban league executives, organizational executives. And then both Mel and I think a large part of this, again, is Mel, attending various meetings will recruit, pass out literature. And I might add that we now count on previous fellows to help us in terms of spreading the word about the program, as well as telling us who are good bets. But it's interesting as to how the word of mouth is a very important element in terms of spreading the word about the program.
And then after someone applies...
After they apply,
yeah.
well, because that's really the burden of your question, we have a admissions committee, and I would say that the things that we are most concerned about is seriousness of purpose, but seriousness of accomplishment also. And we try to get some cluster effect. For instance, if we have people in education, we try to get 2. So we try to bring in fellows who can complement one another. And so there's sort of an individual excellence that we look for, but there's a clustering effect that we also try to get in each program. We also try to get a suitable mix of male, female, and then since this is oriented toward minority leaders, we always want to have somebody from the Spanish-speaking community. And as you know, this year we have our first American Indian. So the balance becomes a very important determinant of who, in effect, gets in. And I'm pleased to say that we don't have any formal academic criteria. We've had people with as little as an 8th grade education all the way up to 3 years beyond the bachelor's in the same class, and I think that this has been terrific. It's worked out very well.
After a fellow is admitted to the program, what kinds of things do you offer him in the way of tuition or stipend?
You know, well, we offer him a stipend, or her a stipend, and that is designed to make it unnecessary for that fellow to work during the course of that year. Then there is a tuition which we pay, and provide a modest research budget so that the fellow can carry on the work that he needs to in order to complete his project. I think we ought to say that one of the major requirements of the program and a key factor in the admissions process, which I failed to note earlier, is that each fellow must state what he would like to work on during the course of the academic year that he is here. And so this research budget that he gets is designed to allow him to travel or do other things which get the data, do whatever he needs to do in order to carry on that research.
What are some of the projects that have been carried on by past fellows?
Well, they have varied all over the lot. In the first year, Oscar Jackson did some very excellent work in starting a cable television information service, CATVIS he called it, and he worked on that, understanding the technology of cable, but also working to try to provide access, community access. Hubie Jones was a fellow, and Byron Rushing was a fellow, and they worked collaboratively on Hubie's campaign. And so that one of the things they were interested in was either making campaign white position papers or coming up with a media effort which was designed to help Hubie's candidacy. In the second year, we had one fellow who was very interested in the criminal justice system, a fellow who was interested in paraprofessionals and organizing, as she would say, the new professionals in Massachusetts. Your own work, which was pulling together, as I would judge, a variety of things which you had in motion, and tying them down in a variety of artistic efforts, so that there's a great latitude for the fellows to work on whatever they wish. In this year's class, one fellow is very concerned with economic development and concerned with the fact that most of this is hit or miss and is unmapped. And so one of the things that he's been working at is providing a map so that this effort at economic development in a ghetto community can proceed somewhat according to theoretical inputs. And one person is trying very hard to come up with a financing campaign for a major national organization. So that it spreads over quite a gamut, and I think some of these have a chance of making some difference.
Okay, there's a seminar every Tuesday night. What's that all about?
Well, the seminar this year, we've called the first semester Developing Your Point of View. And Mel handled that almost entirely, did handle it entirely, but he brought to the campus a variety of points of view in the forms of speakers who could talk about long-range development, including Pan-African socialist, a communist, a Muslim, somebody from SCLC, Kenneth Clark, who's talking about a more open America, somebody from the Delta Ministry. So in the course of that semester, in my judgment, we provided as broad a scope for long-range political economic development, including leaving the country, including alliances with workers, etc., as you would want to get. In the spring, we focus on communicating your point of view. And the emphasis here is the fellows' projects are in the course of preparation, and they are thinking about that. And so what we want to work on are techniques of communication. The fall would be more philosophic development of the point, and the spring more the rhetoric of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not quite worked out that way, but that's part of it. The other part of the seminars, Topper, is to allow us to raise any sorts of question we wish to amongst the fellows about their sense of community here and how they are relating to MIT, what problems they are having, so that it's both, in one sense, a formal seminar, but it also has to do with very informal things, which in fact we all know have to do with whether or not they really are going to be able to focus on that which they came here to do in the first place.
And then in the mixture of what those people look like, you see the racial mixtures. Okay? But again, when you're talking about Latin America, the predominant characteristic is that you see much more the Indian influence than you do in the Caribbean, because for some reason, again, they were able to keep it to the point that, for instance, Peru has preserved the Indian language. Quechua is still spoken by the Indians, and it's a distinct language. Okay? So that if you go to Peru and you want to talk to the Indians, you need an interpreter. Most times. I had the experience in New York once of they had brought in some Quechuans because they were doing an exhibit on some of their artifacts, and they had brought along an interpreter, a Peruvian who spoke Spanish, who spoke Quechuan, and who spoke English, because it was the only way that they could communicate with them. Okay, so that Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama down here, which has its own history, particularly with reference to the United States, in that the United States acquired Panama by recognizing its independence from Colombia, but it really belonged to Colombia. That each country, as I say, has its own history and has its own mixture. But what I hope tonight to be concerned with is Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. Okay, now those three cultures, or three countries, share the same Indian group, a Taino tribe, inhabited all three islands. And in some places, you can see some Indian characteristics in the physiognomy of the people. To me personally, it's more visible in Puerto Rico than it is in Cuba and it is in the Dominican Republic. And certain things that are still there, such as cassave, vegetables, the maracas that we play, we got from the Indians, and the hammer we got from the Indians. The second group and the second culture that the three islands share is the African culture. Again, in some places it is more visible, or the characteristics have been preserved better than in others. Cuba, for instance, has places where the Yoruba religion has been preserved intact. A recent book that I read talked about the Wolof being the major tribe, the Wolof out of Senegal, being the major tribe that was brought over to those islands. And certainly when you look at the family structure of the Caribbean, you see certain characteristics that are very familiar, or very similar to the Wolof culture, particularly in the extended family, and particularly when you talk about the fact that children are not raised by their parents, generally but are given over to aunts and uncles to raise. There's similar kind of patterns, particularly when you go into the interior of the Dominican Republic, of Cuba, and of the other places. The idea being that the young people who have the most energy should be most free to use the energy, and therefore children should be taken care of by those people who are more sedentary or who have less energy. You can certainly see the African influence in its music, and certainly the economy of those three islands was changed by bringing over the sugar cane, and the physiognomy of the islands was changed by bringing over the coconut trees, which I didn't realize had been brought over. I thought they were always there. The third influence is the Spanish culture from Spain. But again, here, if you have to sort of bear in mind what Spain we're talking about. It's not the Spain of 1974, we're talking about the Spain of 1492. And the Spain of 1492 was a Spain that had just gotten unified, that previous to that, previous to Isabel and Ferdinand getting married, it was a country made up of fiefdoms of each person running their own show, that it had been Arab until very recently, and that exactly at the time that Columbus sets out to find the New World is exactly the time that Spain now begins to see itself as a unified whole and feels strong enough to expel the Jews. But it is a very strong Semitic Spain that we're talking about from the Arab point of view and from the Jewish point of view. If you look at those three islands and you look at the more recent influences, cultural influences, Cuba has had a huge Chinese immigration in the past 50, 75 years. If you go to New York now, you see the impact that the Chinese-Cuban community has had on restaurants. It had a huge Jewish community. They had their own synagogue. And Cuba, unlike Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, continually received a new influx of Spaniards from Spain, that is present-day Spain. The Dominican Republic, more recent immigration is Arab and Southern Italian. I'll say a little bit more about that later when I talk about the class structure. Puerto Rico, of course, it's obvious. Since 1898, it's been, the first 50 years, it's been for the most part, a white American cultural influence through their educational system. I don't know if I mentioned this in January when I did my presentation, but Puerto Rico was not allowed to use Spanish as a language for 37 years, so that the total educational system was American. And then in the field of religion, because of course of the missionaries, etc. I have a theory about the American influence in Puerto Rico of the last 25 years, which I see as a black influence. When you walk around San Juan, present day, and you see the influence in the clothes, the black influence of clothes, and you see the number of afros and the so-called salsa of the present day Puerto Rican music. Salsa is no more than jazz, getting more mixed up in there with the Afro-American music. Okay, so much for cultural influence. The other factor that we all share, all three islands share, is a class system. And again, there's some differentiations between islands. Cuba, by the time Castro took power, had developed a middle class. Cuba was a three-class system. The Dominican Republic is still a two-class system. It has not developed a middle class. Puerto Rico has begun to develop one. So what I'm talking about has to be taken in the contents of that information. Nevertheless, the class system is very strong. And there are some sociologists that feel that the class system is stronger than the racist system as a determinant of people's mobility. It certainly seems to be true about the statistics about marriage. Further on in the presentation, when I talk about the role of women and the role of men, I'm going to present what is seen as the ideal. However, the reality is that there has been, or there are, a great number of people that live in what is known as consensual unions. The statistics which show that those numbers are decreasing every year indicate that or one could arrive at the conclusion that the reason they did not marry was because marriage was seen as a process for the upper class, as something that required money to do it, to get the papers and to go through the process. And as those things have gotten more equalized, then the consensual unions have tended to disappear. Okay, I'm talking about the norm, the ideal. Okay, the ideal situation, and here I'll do the presentation of the girl, and you can deduct the role of the male from it, is for a girl to be raised protectively by her family, for her never to have been alone, okay, in any situation, so that there is no question of her virtue, that her husband be the only man that she has ever known, that it's only male cousins, okay, and that a man is looked upon as a good husband if he assumes a protective role, if he is a good breadwinner, and if he creates a situation by which this is possible. All right? Yeah.
In that case, then they must have a very low divorce rates in that city, right? Nobody gets no divorce.
Well, I'm talking about.
I can't hear Frida. Could you please explain, can you run it down?
Well, I think country by country, there probably is a lower divorce rate than in the States. That doesn't, I'm not talking about, I haven't mentioned mistresses. I haven't gone into any of the other
Sort of peripheral. Go into a mistress thing? I thought they weren't allowed to be alone.
No, wait. We're talking about the ideal situation for a girl. Okay.
Just trying to get a good understanding.
No, I'm going to try to deal with that, John. Okay. I'm talking about the program, the tape that's put into your head. Okay. And I haven't talked about yet, if you deviate from that, how you deal with that. Okay. Because we do have a lot of deviation from what I'm presenting. The speaker tonight is not an example of the ideal that we're holding, right? Okay. but I'm saying that this is the program, and this is what's expected, and that only those people who cut themselves away completely from the culture are able to kind of walk away completely from that. That if you stay within the culture and you try to deal with this, then you have to pay a very heavy price.
But it seems
psychologically.
Even within the culture, though, because somebody's mistress is somebody's daughter. So somewhere down the line,
Yeah, but she is still considered by everyone in that community in a separate category than a wife. Okay, and she may be the most successful mistress on the block, but there is still a very strictly defined bad girl, good girl, ideal wife, etc. Okay, and for instance, a title, this title, Don and Doña, which is the most respectful way that you can address a man or a woman, okay? Which, Don and a Doña, you would be Doña Johnny, okay?
But how come I be Doña?
I mean, that's the feminine. Well, I will tell you in a minute. Or Don Frank, okay? That title, which is the highest title that anybody can have, cuts across class lines. Okay, it is not a title that's determined by class, it is a title that's determined by your behavior and the respect that you earn, so that you could be the street vendor. But if your life, you live your life according to those set ideals, you are Don Felipe, the street vendor.
Could you tell me a little about what your project was when you were at the Fellows?
My project was about the new professionals in Massachusetts, which we are an organized group. We are basically so-called paraprofessional people and don't want to be called para. We want to be recognized for the job we can do and not whether we have the degree or not.
To what extent did you develop that project while you were there?
Well, I took the Fellows Program offered me a chance to take a look at what was happening nationally with paraprofessionals, what was happening to them on a statewide basis and locally, and try to take all that information and put it together to see what is the trend, what is happening to so-called paraprofessional people in the job market, in training, and in educational opportunities.
To what extent have you developed that project since you left the Fellows?
Well, it hasn't been easy for us. We're unfunded and we're statewide, which is a big piece, and this winter was just a bad winter with a gas shortage, trying to bring people together across the state. But we've changed a lot of our concepts and ideas because due to the fact that we were community-based, we developed from community-based organizations, and a lot of that money is drying up in the community, and we're having to broaden our scope of where our job market is and where is our training and our educational opportunities, that we've taken a whole political look at new professionalism and like what bills affect new professionals, what kinds of things should we be supporting on a statewide basis to give us the strength that we need. We are now, right at this moment, talking about having a legislative hearing around employment, because we see that as one of the big problems, new professional, how can you transfer those skills into the present job market?
In what way was MIT resourceful to you?
Well, MIT afforded me the opportunity to travel, to look at other new professional groups, to talk to so-called professional people who really wasn't, really aware of how new professionalism is important. I think in the health field it's pointed up so because the professional really can't do the job without the help of the new professional. And as we know them as aides and with those kind of titles. But they're very important assets to, to have. So I think more and more we're trying to develop a collaboration with the professional. So when I was at MIT, I had a chance to make the professionals more aware that they must recognize the new professionals, and they couldn't plan for us without having us helping to make those plans. So I got a chance to spend a year going around just pounding on doors and letting people know that we were there, and we would have to be recognized.
Where was the Fellows Program instrumental in any way in the development of your career? What you're doing now versus what you were doing before you went into the program?
Well, I've always been the advocate for new professionals, even my last, job before what I'm doing now, and I kind of, but this offered me a larger area now to deal with the whole scope and to be the advocate, because being equal employment opportunity person, that helps me to really see a broader base than I would have seen on my thing in my last job.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to thank you. It's good seeing you again.
Thank you for having me.
Chuck, what was your project when you were at the Community Fellows?
Well, I concentrated my work on two different projects. One of the projects was the whole I-95 highway fight. The BTPR transportation study was going on then. I spent a lot of time working with that and with the organizations who were fighting the highway. The other thing was the project around Roxbury as an independent political entity, looking at the economics of that, the kind of revenues that would be needed, whether the amount of money we put in the city of Boston today would enable us to become an independent city economically.
Mm-hmm. Has any of that time you put in there been put to use? I mean, have you been able to implement any of the things that you felt while you were there?
It was I think, tremendously valuable experience for me. Mm-hmm. That the time I spent on the highway fight was personally beneficial, just in terms of my ability to learn more and grow and understand about how the government really works, things like that on the community. Plus, mm-hmm. we were able to win, at least win the first stage. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the work on Roxbury as an independent city, I think obviously we're a long way from that, but there's a lot of information that came out from that that's been useful to me and that I've tried to share with some other people, mm-hmm. and that I hope is useful in the coming years as black people in Boston look more and more seriously at the question of the kinds of moves we need to make in order to have control over our situation here in the Boston area.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Community Fellows Program was generally useful to you?
It was, as I said, it was very useful. I think the value of the program is that it allows the individual to shape the use of the time himself or herself. That is, that each person in the year that I was there probably used the time in different kinds of ways. Some people concentrated on some classwork that was valuable to them. Others went around and did some research in other parts of the country and looked at that in relationship to Boston. I concentrated a lot of my efforts here on, in Boston and the transportation piece. But it was a tremendous experience for me and opportunity for me, and I think for everybody in the program, my year, I know had the same kind of feelings.
Was MIT generally resourceful?
There are resources at MIT that, if you look for them, that they were there and were available. Like any large institution, they weren't going to go out of their way to lay themselves open. But again, I think people who had an idea in terms of what kinds of things they were looking for and went looking for them were able to get access. I think that was maybe the key word. There was access to a lot of material, a lot of ideas, a lot of people, if somebody really wanted to make use of that access.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that this kind of program is the kind of program that should be made more available to people who have the kind of experience that you have? A situation, in fact, where you can go from your community, sit for a year, rest, think, develop new ideas.
I think it's tremendously important kind of program to have across the country for people who've been out there struggling and who have reached a point where they want to get some new ideas, want to look back on what they've done, want to see where they need to be taking their action, where other people can be moving in the future, that it provides an opportunity for that. And I think the key thing about this program, and the thing that makes it a worthwhile program, is that at least during the year that I was there, and I think during the year succeeding that, there was a freedom. That is that the resources were made available, but the assumption was that you had enough integrity and enough commitment and motivation that you would make use of them in a way that would be productive for black people, without people saying this is what you have to do and this is how you have to do it. So I think that aspect of it, under the leadership of Mel King and Frank Jones, is perhaps the thing that sets it apart from perhaps some other models in other educational programs around the country, that our creativity, our natural creativity, was able to get a play and an openness there that some other programs, they really might stifle it.
I dig. Did you see any growth in yourself from the time that you went into the program and the time that you left?
Well, I believe that whenever you try to think on questions where they've been unclear, and try to gain new understandings about who you are and where you need to be going and how you need to be going there with a lot of other people, and begin to see how you fit into a larger whole, that you can't lose. You can't lose when you're trying to wrestle with those kind of questions. And that's what the fellow says. They say, here's an opportunity for black Spanish-speaking people to come in and kind of explore where they've been individually and collectively, and where they need to go. And that, like I said, I think that very process, you have to come out, as a winner. You have to grow, because you get a chance to think about it rather than always do. Because I think one of the things that happens is sometimes you get very mechanical. Sometimes you just wind up, you get into things going through the motions. And what the fellows does, I think, is give a lot of people a chance to sit back and say, well, look, these motions we're going through made sense for the 1960s or made 1971, but in 73. Are those mechanical acts, that we're doing now still relevant? And in most cases they aren't, because things change, so you need to change with them. So it gives you a chance to break those old patterns, break those old habits, develop some new styles and procedures and content that are relevant, make you and the community, to the extent that you bring it back, relevant for the struggle that we're going to be into in the 70s, in the 80s and 90s, and on.
Right on. Okay. Excellent. What is the project that you're working on while you're here, Ms. Tillman?
The project that I'm working on while I'm here in the Fellows Program is what I call a half of a chance campaign. It's a fundraising effort for the organization. Our organization have never been self-supported. We've always had to depend on church groups, foundations, and a few individuals who give tax-exempt money. And even though we appreciate that, and we couldn't have made it without their assistance, but there are problems with the kind of activity we need to carry on. We need to be self-sustained and self-supporting. So we aside to the membership, which is just the $1 per year, my campaign is to raise $6.25 million, and I propose to do that by getting 50 cents out of 12.5 million people.
It's a lot of people.
A lot of people, but I think that it can be done.
Have you got anybody else at this time actively involved in helping you to organize that campaign?
Yes, the campaign itself came to me as in a vision in March 1973, and just only in the talking stage. I just kind of talked about it to a few people, from 5, 10, or 25 people. And up until September, we began to put some things on paper. And then I've gone along to do some testing. And one of the cities, the key cities that is going to be tested is Los Angeles, number one, because I'm primarily from Los Angeles, and I have some theory about charity beginning at home. So I felt like if I can work with it in my home state, in my home city, that I might be successful in other places. So I've gone far enough to get a lady who was a member of the first organization that started a welfare rights group, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but the first group was organized in Watts, California in 1963 by 6 women, 5 women, and then 6 including myself. This woman is one of the 6 women who was coordinating the Los Angeles campaign, so I had the chance. What we've done out there, our first meeting, I believe was in January, was we got folk involved, like we had representation from the mayor's office and representation from the Model Cities program and other programs and agencies in the community that has contact with the community. So they're working at it. We're not doing it in a rapid kind of pace because I don't believe in throwing something together all at once. So they're working slowly in the Los Angeles area. We also have Baton Rouge, Louisiana is going to be when I tested. Cities, Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, and I just added 2 others, which is Flint, Michigan, and Muskegon, Michigan. That this will be a testing ground. I have ladies there who will be working specifically on the campaign, along with a person in our office and myself.
What are some of the things that NWRO is working on now, program-wise?
Program-wise, well, you know, we still are pushing for a guaranteed adequate income for everybody, not just welfare folks, black folks, or what have you. There are a lot of people who work every day with a family of 10 don't make $4,000 a year. We think they ought to be supplemented. We use the Bureau of Labor Statistics where they spend all that money doing research, but they never do anything about implementing the program, and right now it's $7,500 for a family of 4. There are many families don't make that much and got a family of 10, so that's our first priority. The other one is daycare, child care centers that is badly needed if we talk about work and training programs for people who need child care. We don't have no adequate child care facilities in this country at all. So that's one of our priorities. That's 2 of our priorities. Then we are working in the health field where around hypertension. About 70% of the women on welfare, diabetics, suffer from hypertension. These 3 things go together. Diabetes, hypertension leads to heart trouble. And that's another one of our programs that we want to migrate into our ongoing operation. That's just some of them.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Since the program has been in operation, what do you regard as being its high points?
I think one of the best things that's happened with the program has been the opportunity for people to make some linkages. As you know, we've got people in the program from across the country, East Coast, West Coast, South, Central United States. And it's these kind of linkages that are going to stand the people very well over time. I think the other thing that has been for me important is the fact that people have had a chance to reflect on the ways that they've operated for the past several years. The chance to be able to evaluate what they've done and to weigh it and then consider some new alternatives, I think over time is going to be very beneficial for the communities that they're going to work in.
What do you see in the future for the Fellows Program?
Well, I think the future of the Fellows Program is first related to those linkages that we talked about. If the people who completed the program continue to do the kinds of things that they started here, if they increase their capacity to function effectively, other people are going to want to participate in the Fellows Program. People in those communities are going to encourage other people to come and participate. I think the multiplier effects of that will ultimately have, as we have in one instance, one of the past fellows who is attempting through a foundation he's now connected with to get people from the Atlanta region involved in the program. I think that here is good an example of the possibilities over time, because this kind of program gives us a chance to convey to people what it is that is happening with this program. Beyond that, the question of MIT's commitment and role is one that's still being worked through. If we are able to, through this kind of an attempt, get them to see the importance of the program, not only to the fellows and the communities they come to, but for MIT students. One of the things that we feel pretty good about is the fact that we had Bill Wright came in and do something on communications. Now that has sparked several people to move into the media and the communications field. What else it did was it got the Department of Urban Studies and Planning to be aware of the importance of communication in the planning process. And one of their graduates is doing her thesis on media and its role in planning.
Could you see a growth in the fellows from the time they came into the program and the time they had completed their stay?
Yeah, I think that interestingly enough that with some fellows, I've seen some additional growth or even more growth since they've been away from the program, because they've had a chance to really test out some of the ideas that they had. One of the things that I think they come to as a result of participating in the program is the importance of finding a common denominator to pull together around. What we have noticed is that folks come in with their individual program idea, and toward the end of the year are ready for working jointly, or they get uptight about the fact that they came to a program and worked as individuals and did not move quick enough, or at all in some instances, to work on some joint projects. I think that what that does is it shows that they have grown to the point where they can more clearly recognize the importance of a unified approach to things. Unified in terms of that objective, they can recognize the importance of the diversity that they have within that. That's one of the things that I've been most impressed about in terms of the growth of fellows. For other people, the ability to use the resources that they've come into contact with. Many fellows come and are very skeptical about the institution, about what it is, and the fact that it is, they feel it may be attempting to rip them off. But by the end of the year, they're concerned about the fact that they did not take as much advantage in some instances of the resources that were here. But many of them really move from the point of standing aloof to a maximum utilization of the resources that are available in this community.
Excellent. Thank you. First heard about the Community Fellows Program about 3 years ago when a friend of mine who had come up to Boston by the name of Tony Lee, who's an architect now at MIT, also a planning instructor, told me about a program that was available to people who had been working very actively in minority communities who might in fact want some time off to study or just rest, but might be able to use that time to the advantage of their organization or the community. Came up and talked to Mel King, and we discussed several things that I might do if I in fact came to MIT on one of the community fellowships. I decided to do some work in education, at the same time get my media Jones together, because I've been making films and producing music and a range of things like that. And so much of my time had been involved in just administrating the community organization that I was involved with, I in fact didn't have time to devote to that particular asset or that particular facet of my career. The interesting thing is, when I was given that opportunity and began to develop my films and my music more fully, I began to recognize that I, in fact, was a very capable person in that area. As it turns out, the Say Brother Committee was interviewing people for the producership of that show, and I was, in fact, one of the candidates. And on the basis of my prior experience and the capability which I had developed and the expertise I had developed as a result of having a year at MIT as a fellow, that put me in a very good position for that producership, and ultimately I came to Say Brother, and I can say that it's really as a result of having had a year at MIT as a community fellow. Could you tell me something about the project that you're working on at the Community Fellows now?
Well, the title of the project is looking at the non-Puerto Rican Hispanic population of Boston, but what I've actually been working on is the Dominican population. There are about 6,000 here in Boston, but if you take, say, a 2-hour radius of the outside of Boston, you could get a figure of about 30 to 40,000. And I chose the Dominican population, one, because I'm Dominican, and I thought it would be easier to have access to the information. 2, because they're the second largest group, the second largest immigrant group in Boston. That would be the Cubans would be first, the Dominicans second. And thirdly, because if I figured that looking at that population, I could make some conclusions about what a non-citizen immigrant goes through, and maybe, then have some conclusions about the Ecuadorians and the other Hispanic people that live in Boston. So what happened was that I ended up working on trying to establish a consulate, because that's what the population needed desperately, since right now they have to go to New York for any piece of paper, any kind of certification that a citizen needs. And this creates quite a hardship, particularly for people who work and cannot take a day off, that sort of thing. So as part of my project, I documented the numbers, and then have been to the Dominican Republic to talk to the Subsecretary of State, and finally 2 weeks ago met with the Vice President. And now the agreement is that I should prepare a written document to put in the works, so to speak, of the Dominican government.
Heavy. That's heavy.
But what I've accomplished in the year is to bring the matter to their attention, and it seems to me that they are now ready to do something about that. So I'm very pleased with it.
Would you say that the Community Fellows program has definitely been an asset?
Absolutely. When I joined the Fellows, and I think one of the reasons that I applied was because I was at Crossroads. I had just left my position as director of the Spanish Alliance. And coming from that experience of setting up a community agency and all the problems and hassles of government funding and all of that, I knew that I was very exhausted, and I didn't have the energy to continue doing that, but I didn't know what else I was going to do. And the Fellows program gave me an opportunity to sort those thoughts out, get involved with my own people, and it's just been fantastic. And the project took a slightly different turn than I thought. I didn't really expect to get involved with the Dominican government, but as it turned out, that's what the community wanted, and so that's what I did.
Excellent.
So
Excellent. Good luck.
thank you very much.
Right on with it too. Frank, what do you see in the future for the Community Fellows program?
Well, Topper, we're looking at that question right now. It seems to me that the answer to it's going to come out of a sort of a three-pronged attack. The first is there a sufficient market of fellows over a period of time? For instance, one would have thought that wouldn't be a problem at all, but this year, for instance, the volume of our applications was down about a half from what it was in the previous year. And one must ask, whether or not we're going to be able to get the caliber of person we want for this program over a period of time. The second question is, how does this effort fit in with the Department of Urban Studies and Planning and its curriculum development, and whether they feel that this effort makes sense and adds to what they are already doing and see themselves doing over a period of time. And that's a question, obviously, that members of the faculty are going to have to be involved in. For instance, at the Sloan School of Management, as you probably know, they have concluded that it's in their self-interest to work with continuing education of advanced managers from business. I hope that the Faculty of Urban Studies and Planning will conclude that it's in their self-interest, it's a quid pro quo for them to be working with mature leaders from the minority community, because I don't believe, frankly, that America is going to evolve in an evolutionary sense and in a sense that's true to America's ideals unless there are in the minority communities leaders who can sense, articulate their needs, and help those needs to be fulfilled. And part of this, it seems to me, is the development of a cadre, providing for them what this program provides, an opportunity to get away and work with people who've been thinking about those problems. So that it seems to me important that the department feels that it's in its self-interest as well as in the self-interest of the fellow. So the second has to do with the educational aspects of it. And the third has to do with, can we find the money? We are primarily foundation supported, but we have indeed had a modest effort to get money from Boston-based businesses, and so that if we can raise the money, the program budget is about $250,000 a year. We probably could do with less. For instance, this year, for the first time, we have a fellow who brought her own support, and I'm pleased to say from an all-black town in Ohio, came with her own stipend, so that we did not have to pay that, but we paid for her tuition and her research expenses. But more and more, we hope to get this sort of mix, a mix of funding maybe from foundations, maybe from businesses who will see it in their interest, and maybe even somebody has suggested to me recently we ought to be going after some of the unions. So I would hope, but this is not determined yet, that from this sort of mixed bag, from some MIT funds perhaps, foundation funds, private sector funds from both from management as well as from labor, as well as some support from minority community itself, that this type of program could go on. And that's what we're proceeding to try to develop now, and to see whether it makes sense that it should. And the answer will have to be only when we've pulled all of that together.